Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear a woman telephoning a tourist office to ask about free activities. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Good morning, this is Burnham Tourist Office, Martin speaking.
Oh, hello. I saw a poster about free things to do in the area, and it said people should phone you for information. I'm coming to Burnham with my husband and 2 children for a few days on June the 27th, or possibly the 28th, and I'd like some ideas for things to do on the 29th.
Yes, of course.
The date that the woman wants information about is the 29th of June, so the letter C has been circled. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Good morning, this is Burnham Tourist Office, Martin speaking.
Oh, hello. I saw a poster about free things to do in the area, and it said people should phone you for information. I'm coming to Burnham with my husband and 2 children for a few days on June the 27th, or possibly the 28th, and I'd like some ideas for things to do on the 29th.
Yes, of course. Okay. Then let's start with a couple of events especially for children. The art gallery is holding an event called Family Welcome that day, when there are activities and trails to use throughout the gallery.
That sounds interesting. What time does it start?
The gallery opens at 10 and the Family Welcome event runs from 10:30 until 2 o'clock. The gallery stays open until 5, and several times during the day they're going to show a short film that the gallery has produced. It demonstrates how ceramics are made, and there'll be equipment and materials for children to have a go themselves. Last time they ran the event there was a film about painting, which went down very well with the children, and they're now working on one about sculpture.
I like the sound of that. And what other events happen in Burnham?
Well, do you all enjoy listening to music?
Oh, yes.
Well, there are several free concerts taking place at different times, 1 or 2 in the morning, the majority at lunchtime and a couple in the evening, and they range from pop music to Latin American.
The Latin American could be fun. What time is that?
It's being repeated several times in different places. They're performing in the Central Library at 1 o'clock, then at 4 it's in the City Museum, and in the evening at 7:30 there's a longer concert in the theatre.
Right. I'll suggest that to the rest of the family.
Something else you might be interested in is the boat race along the river.
Oh, yes. Do tell me about that.
The race starts at Offord Marina to the north of Burnham and goes as far as Summer Pool. The best place to watch it from is Charlesworth Bridge, though that does get rather crowded.
And who's taking part?
Well, local boat clubs, but the standard is very high. One of them came first in the West of England Regional Championship in May this year. It was the first time a team from Burnham has won. It means that next year they'll be representing the region in the National Championship.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Now, I've heard something about Paxton Nature Reserve. It's a good place for spotting unusual birds, isn't it?
That's right, throughout the year. There is a lake there as well as a river, and they provide a very attractive habitat. So it's a good idea to bring binoculars if you have them. And just at the moment you can see various flowers that are pretty unusual. The soil at Paxton isn't very common. They're looking good right now.
Right. My husband will be particularly interested in that.
and there's going to be a talk and slideshow about mushrooms, and you'll be able to go out and pick some afterwards and study the different varieties.
Uh-huh. And is it possible for children to swim in the river?
Yes, part of it has been fenced off to make it safe for children to swim in. It's very shallow, and there's a lifeguard on duty whenever it's open. The lake is too deep, so swimming isn't allowed there.
Okay, we must remember to bring their swimming things in case we go to Paxton. How long does it take to get there by car from Burnham?
About 20 minutes, but parking is very limited, so it's usually much easier to go by bus, and it takes about the same time.
Right. Well, I'll discuss the options with the rest of the family. Thanks very much for all your help.
You're welcome.
Goodbye.
Bye.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a talk given by a woman called Shona Ferguson about changes in a town called Barford. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
First of all, let me thank you all for coming to this public meeting to discuss the future of our town. Our first speaker is Shona Ferguson from Barford Town Council. Shona.
Thank you. First, I'll briefly give you some background information. Then I'll be asking you for your comments on developments in the town. Well, as you don't need me to tell you, Barford has changed a great deal in the last 50 years. These are some of the main changes. 50 years ago, buses linked virtually every part of the town and the neighbouring towns and villages. Most people use them frequently, but not now, because the bus companies concentrate on just the routes that attract most passengers. So parts of the town are no longer served by buses. Even replacing old, uncomfortable buses with smart new ones has had little impact on passenger numbers. It's sometimes said that bus fares are too high, but in relation to average incomes, fares are not much higher than they were 50 years ago. Changes in the road network are affecting the town. The centre was recently closed to traffic on a trial basis, making it much safer for pedestrians. The impact of this is being measured. The new cycle paths separating bikes from cars in most main roads are being used far more than was expected, reducing traffic and improving air quality. And although the council's attempts to have a bypass constructed have failed, we haven't given up hope of persuading the government to change its mind. Shopping in the town centre has changed over the years. Many of us can remember when the town was crowded with people going shopping. Numbers have been falling for several years, despite efforts to attract shoppers, for instance by opening new car parks. Some people combine shopping with visits to the town's restaurants and cafes. Most shops are small independent stores, which is good, but many people prefer to use supermarkets and department stores in nearby large towns, as there are so few well-known chain stores here. Turning now to medical facilities. The town is served by family doctors in several medical practices, fewer than 50 years ago, but each catering for far more patients. Our hospital closed 15 years ago, which means journeys to other towns are unavoidable. On the other hand, there are more dentists than there used to be. Employment patterns have changed along with almost everything else. The number of schools and colleges has increased, making that the main employment sector. Services such as website design and accountancy have grown in importance, and surprisingly perhaps, manufacturing hasn't seen the decline that has affected it in other parts of the country.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Now I'll very quickly outline current plans for some of the town's facilities before asking for your comments. As you'll know if you regularly use the car park at the railway station, it's usually full. The railway company applied for permission to replace it with a multi-storey car park, but that was refused. Instead, the company has bought some adjoining land, and this will be used to increase the number of parking spaces. The Grand, the old cinema in the High Street, will close at the end of the year and reopen on a different site. You've probably seen the building under construction. The plan is to have 3 screens with fewer seats rather than just the one large auditorium in the old cinema. I expect many of you shop in the indoor market. It's become more and more shabby looking, and because of fears about safety, it was threatened with demolition. The good news is that it will close for 6 weeks to be made safe and redecorated, and the improved building will open in July. Lots of people use the library, including school and college students who go there to study. The council has managed to secure funding to keep the library open later into the evening, twice a week. We would like to enlarge the building in the not-too-distant future, but this is by no means definite. There's no limit on access to the nature reserve on the edge of town, and this will continue to be the case. What will change, though, is that the council will no longer be in charge of the area. Instead, it will become the responsibility of a national body that administers most nature reserves in the country. Okay, now let me ask you if you have...
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear a discussion among 3 students who are organising an international film festival at their college. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully to the first part of the discussion and answer questions 21 to 24.
Thanks for coming to this meeting on such short notice, Anna and Veronica. It looks like we have just become the organising committee for this year's International Film Festival. We've all just met, so perhaps we should start by an introduction with a bit of background from each of us.
Okay, I'm Anna. I finished 3 years of a languages degree in Sweden, where I come from. This year I decided to study overseas to get to know a different part of the world. I'm also a big fan of European cinema, especially French and Italian. Those are the languages I majored in, along with English. To me, film is a great way to learn about the rest of the world. I was in the film club at my university, so when I saw the notice asking for volunteers, I thought it would be a good way to meet people and get involved in something I really enjoy.
Thanks, Anna. My name is Veronica and I come from Italy. I'm doing graduate studies in English literature. I went to some of the films in the festival last year and enjoyed them. I especially liked the video interviews. That was when I decided to get involved. I used to do film reviews for our student newspaper back home.
Hi, I'm Chris from Scotland and I'm in fourth year journalism. Cinema is my hobby. Last year I joined the organising committee just like you have now, and somehow this year I've ended up in charge. I'm actually able to use my coordinating work on the festival towards a credit for one of my courses. I have to write up a report on the festival with recommendations, so that's an extra motivation for me. So I hope this is going to be a good experience for us all. Okay, where would you like to start?
How about a general overview of the festival? I don't really know much about it.
Well, the film festival was started by International Student Society 5 years ago and has grown every year. It is held over 4 nights during study break, Wednesday to Saturday. Normally we show 3 films a night. Last year we tried to choose films from different parts of the world that fit together in some way, maybe a similar theme. Or we could feature a type of film like action films or science fiction.
Now you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen to the rest of the discussion and answer questions 25 to 30.
Who picks the films?
It's up to us on the committee to decide.
You mean we get to pick all the films ourselves? What a hard decision. There are so many to choose from.
Well, that's the fun part. We have this catalogue of independent distributors. The films are listed by language and have a short summary. We just have to go through it to find a good combination of films that will attract an audience.
Veronica mentioned something about interviews. How does that fit in?
We set up cameras in the foyer of the theatre and did live interviews before, during intermission and after the screening. Anyone from the audience could come up and talk about the film. The Broadcasting and Journalism School set it up and ran the interviews. They were shown on big screens around the lobby and in the theatre. It went over really well. We had a long lineup of students waiting to be interviewed on TV. Everybody wanted their minute of fame.
Great idea.
Yeah, it worked really well. We should certainly do something similar again.
Maybe even develop the idea further, like a website with audience reviews and discussion, so we can get as much participation and involvement as possible.
Hey, that's a good idea.
Can I ask a question? None of the films are in English, right? Are they dubbed or subtitled?
Well, we do occasionally choose a film in English, but only from unusual places where the dialect is so strong they sometimes need subtitles, like the Caribbean or even Scotland. The majority of films in the festival are foreign language, dubbed in English. We've learned from experience that students don't like reading subtitles. Maybe they read too much already. Whatever the reason, the subtitled films get smaller audiences, so we avoid them as much as possible.
So how large an audience can we expect, and how much does it cost to get in?
It costs $5 per film, or a $20 pass for the whole event. All 12 films for the real movie fan. We would have broken even last year, except for a bad storm on the Friday night. We almost had to cancel the whole thing. But overall, we had a good turnout. More than 2,000 people in 4 days.
Oh, that's what I was wondering about. The financial part. Where does the funding come from? What kind of budget do we have?
The festival is subsidised by the Student Council. We generate money through advertising and through admission charges. We'll go over the budget in details a little later, but we've got lots of work to do in the meantime.
I guess we have to start pretty soon.
Well, I think by the 1st of March at the latest. We need to select all the films. Then we have to find some advertisers to sponsor the event. That shouldn't be too hard. We'll just start with last year's list. Our deadline for that should be the middle of March. By the end of March, we need to design the programme. Then we can get posters made up and distributed in April.
Like you said, we need some clever promotion, something to generate interest and get people talking. We have 4 months to get ready. It should be enough time.
OK, where do we start?
Let's start by talking about films, since that is the best part, and see what we come up with. What was the best film you saw last year?
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4.
You are going to hear a short talk about the banks in Britain. As you listen, complete the statements below.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for turning up today for this short talk I'm going to give on student banking. Many of you are unfamiliar with the way banks work in this country, and today's talk should just give you a few starting points. Well, as you probably know, you'll need to open a bank account while you are here. The safest place to keep your money is a bank. Choose one that is near where you study. All the major banks in Britain offer special facilities for students and will be only too happy to explain how to open an account. The most useful type of account is a current account. You can pay in money received in any form and then draw it out when you need it by using your checkbook. Writing out cheques in their name can make payments to other people. If you want to draw out cash for yourself, make the cheque payable in your own name or to cash. A cheque crossed with 2 parallel lines is even safer, as it must be paid into a bank account. Payment by cross cheque has the added advantage that when the person to whom you have given the cheque presents it at a bank, it will eventually come back to your bank and provide proof of payment. Most people now ask their bank to supply only ready crossed cheques. Most banks don't make charges if you keep more than a certain amount of money in your account. However, you shouldn't overdraw on your account, that is, withdraw more money than you have in without the bank's permission. If you borrow money from the bank, there will be an interest charge. You will also have to pay a small charge to convert foreign currency paid into your bank into sterling. If you have more money than you need for month-to-month expenses, it is a good idea to open a deposit account for some of it, where it can earn interest. This interest is taxable, but if your bank knows that you are not normally resident in Britain, then you do not pay tax on it. You can't pay by cheque on a deposit account, and to withdraw money you should give the bank 7 days' notice, or you'll lose 7 days' interest. When you have established yourself as a satisfactory customer with the bank, they can issue you a cheque card. This is really an identity card, which guarantees that correctly written cheques up to the value of £50 will be honoured by the bank. A cheque card can be very useful, as many shops and enterprises, particularly in London and the cities, will not accept a cheque unless a cheque guarantee card backs it. You can also use it with your chequebook to draw up to £50 cash from almost any bank in Britain. If you also ask for an Euro cheque card, this can be used in the same way to draw cash from most banks in Europe. Many banks provide dispensing machines, generally set in the wall of the bank outside, where you can draw cash when the bank is crowded or closed. Provided you are a satisfactory customer, the bank can issue you a cash card which allows you to draw up to £100 a day.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.